live in times when the idea of India is fabricated and refabricated. We live in times when the idea of nationalism, idea of patriotism, of sedition is defined and redefined. We live in times where people get lynched for keeping beef in the refrigerator or falling in love with a person of another faith. We live in times where the secular in our constitution is evaporating with the hit of Hindutva fanaticism. We live in times where the spiritual is slowly disappearing from our religion and the political is entering in our religion. Normally, we elect governments to change our future. But we live in times that our government is changing our past. We are told that anything which is foreign, anything which is a foreign influence is bad. We have had a glorious past and we should go back to our traditional past, ancient past, and we should shed any foreign influence because that is evil and go back to the so-called Sanatan Dharma, which is redefined again by those in power. Let me tell you, if I have to talk about one thing which defines the plurality of this country, and I think this is the food we eat today. Normally, the food is also the cause of causing religious fanaticism because somebody who doesn't eat the food, eats the food what you don't eat is the other. The food is a cause of fanaticism, religious fanaticism, but I want to use food as a weapon against fanaticism and also to prove a point that there is nothing which is pure. Our culture is a mixture of many, many different things. Let me tell you that the food which was cooked by our great-great-great-grandmother is more foreign than Sonia Gandhi. Perhaps the earliest food we could describe is the Indus Valley food. I will not go in much detail, but we had wheat, we had barley, rice, ragi, we had citrus fruits, mangoes, pomegranates, and everybody ate meat. These are the laddus, which are 4,000 years old, which were excavated in Rajasthan in 2017, and they're multi-grain laddus. There are quite a few influences which has made our food what it is. The Chola conquest, the Portuguese, the Mughals, the British, the Chinese. The Cholas ruled the Southeast Asia. Many things came through the Cholas. Actually, the fermentation technology comes from the Southeast Asia. We have adopted it because the Chola kings came to find their brides here. And they also came with their cooks. And then a lot of things which they learned in Southeast Asia were brought here. This is a very interesting story of nutmeg. Now, a lot of spices in India have come from Southeast Asia. Nutmeg is one of them. Nutmeg is only grown in one island, which is called the Banda Island in Indonesia. And this island, the nutmeg was so expensive that the Dutch controlled this island. And it was sold all over the world for high prices. And there was a fight between the British and the Dutch over this Banda Island. This was in 1667. And then the Dutch decided that they will keep the Banda Island, but have a treaty with the British. And they decided to exchange an island for Banda Island. And so a treaty was signed in London, and the British were given another island. And that island, which was exchanged for Banda Island, is Manhattan. Manhattan was exchanged for Banda Island only because of nutmeg. And in English language, in American English, there's a very interesting word. It's called nutmegger. Now, nutmegger, because nutmegs were expensive, there was a lot of adulteration happening. People would make false, fake nutmegs out of wood, and they will be mixed with real nutmegs. So those who cheated in this way were called nutmeggers. Mangosteen, kokum has come from Southeast Asia. Dragon fruit is from there. Love apples. Now, this date is 20th of May, 1498. Vasco da Gama arrives in Kappad in Calicut. Actually, when Vasco da Gama comes, I think almost the history is sailing on that ship. And this visit of Vasco da Gama has caused many, many things. But one of the most interesting things it has caused is it has changed what we eat in India. Most of the things which were brought by Vasco da Gama, most of Indian food, a large percentage of it is come from Brazil. And you will be wondering why from Brazil? Why did Vasco da Gama bring things from Brazil? You must remember that in 1498, there was no steam engine discovered. You would expect that the Portuguese would come from Lisbon along the coast of Africa, come to the Cape of Good Hope, and then cross the Arabian Sea and come to Goa, which was the capital of the Portuguese Empire. But then this was not possible because steam engine was... So they had to go first to the west from Lisbon, come down, and then climb up to the Cape of Good Hope. During one such voyage in 1500, Captain Cabral touched Brazil, because Brazil is like pregnant America projecting into the Atlantic Ocean. They colonized Brazil, and Brazil became a stopover for voyages from Lisbon to Goa. And everything from Brazil came to Goa, and everything from Goa went to Brazil. I live in Goa. Now, what are the things? Chilies, tomatoes, potatoes, papaya, cashew, tapioca, pineapple, marigold flowers, guava, chiku, peanuts, bougainvillea, sweet potatoes, custard apple, and there are another 30, 40 things. All this has come from Brazil. And lots of things in Brazil have gone from India. So now the most important thing which comes from Brazil are the chilies. Now, chilies are not Indian. We had miri, we had pepper. Chilies came from Brazil, and chili is perhaps the only item from one continent which went to the other and became so popular that we cannot do without chilies in India. If we have to follow the Ghar Wapasi program, first thing, we'll have to give up chilies. I think the most fanatic bhaks will not be ready to give up chilies. So what are the names of chilies in India? We call them Kali Mirch, Hari Mirch, Lal Mirch. Now, mirch is pepper. So, mirch, we just added Kali Mirch was pepper. So, we added Hari Mirch and Lal Mirch. And in Kashmir, it is called Mirch Baingan. The chili is called Mirch Baingan. I have made a lot of sculptures of chilies. These are chilies made out of tires. I must tell you that there is no mention of chili in any Indian scripture before 1550s. In Vedas, there is no mention of chilies. The next book is in Arthashastra. There is a description of many, many dishes which were cooked during that time, but all with pepper and the rest of the spices. The book after that is Aine Akbari by Abdul Fazl. This was in 1590. Aine Akbari mentions the dishes cooked in Akbar's kitchen, all with pepper and the rest of the spices, and there is no mention of chilies. The first mention of chili in Indian written word is in a poem by Purandar Das, who was a saint poet living in Hampi. And he says, "Oh chili, I have seen you become red from green. You have made my food so delicious and tasty that when I eat you, I even forget to utter the name of Vitthala." So that is a kind of praise he showers on chilies. This is Vasco da Gama with chilies. Cashew is another fruit. Now, India is the largest producer of cashew in the world. Cashew came from Brazil. This is a tree in Brazil which occupies 7,800 square meters. One tree. The cashew of all kinds are popular. Cashew fruit is converted into cashew feni in Goa. This is very popular in Goa. And this is the process of making cashew feni. The next thing which the Portuguese brought was tobacco. Tobacco grew in Brazil. The Brazilian tobacco was brought first to Goa. It could not grow in Goa, but it started growing in Deccan areas, so tobacco started growing there. And then this is Christopher Columbus trying the tobacco way back in 1488. Now in Goa, we have a god called Vetal. This Vetal is a village god, usually in the outskirts of the village. And in Goa, we have a tradition that we offer him chilies, tobacco, and feni, the cashew feni. So now, all three things which are offered to Vaitar in Goa, feni, chilies, and tobacco, were brought by the Portuguese. So before the Portuguese came, the poor fellow must be starving. This technology of getting rid of evil eye with chilies has also been brought by the Portuguese, because before that, this technology did not exist. In Goa, the grandmothers usually will take chili and just take it around a child's head and throw it in the fire to get rid of the evil eye. So this is also an imported technology. Maize. If you tell a Punjabi that makhi ki roti aapki nahi hai, it has come from Brazil, thappad marega. Now, makhi ki roti has become a part of Punjab, but maize came from Brazil. It also went to, from Goa, from India. It went to Africa, and in Mozambique, and the most popular dish is posho, and the maize is called melinda. So that is basically something which came from India, because maize was first brought to India and then went to Africa, and maize was easy to grow, and it is also responsible for the population explosion in Africa and even in India, because it's very easy. Now, in Sravana in Karnataka, there is a sculpture of Devi holding maize. Now, it looks like maize. Now, this is much earlier, much before the Portuguese came. The Portuguese conquered Goa in 1510, but this sculpture dates back to 1150. Now, what is this then? There are many scholars who have an opinion that perhaps pre-colonial days, there was a trans-Pacific connection between South America and India. It is possible. So it might have come from there. There is one theory. The other theory is it is not maize, but it is some imaginary fruit called mukta fal, which is fruit of pearls. Now, these are African soldiers in the Portuguese army. They were from Africa. In Goa, we had a lot of the African soldiers, because the slave trade, we talk about a transatlantic slave trade, but there was a huge Indian Ocean slave trade, and the Portuguese started it. And the black people, they cooked some chicken with a lot of spices, especially coriander and rest of the spices, and the Portuguese officer liked it very much. And that is called chicken kafrial. In Goa, those who have been to Goa, this chicken kafrial is a very popular dish. And this was, why was it called kafrial? That's because the blacks were called kafir. Kafir, one who is not Muslim. And that's how this word kafrial came. The pineapple, again, came from Brazil. Pineapple looked like jackfruit. So when it arrived here, especially in Tamil Nadu, it was called Portuguese chakka. In Kerala, it was called Portuguese chakka. Sitafa, this comes again from Brazil. Sitafa, Ramfa, Hanumanfa is new christening. The new names given to it. The original name was Ate. The name in South America was Ate. And in Goa, it is still called Ater, because Goa was a gateway for many fruits, because Goa was the headquarters of the Portuguese Empire. Guava comes from Brazil. Avocado, chiku. If you cut the chiku, the white sap comes out, and you just add sugar and boil it. That was world's first chewing gum. And that's why perhaps the biggest company selling chewing gum is called Chiclets. Rajma comes from Brazil. Now here there is a little island called Madeira. Now Madeira is an island in Atlantic to the west of Lisbon, and it was very famous for wine. And the Portuguese would bring the wine from Madeira and hand it over and gift it to the Mughals, the Mughal emperors. And if you, one of the reasons why in Urdu, Madeira is a word for alcohol, the Madeira most probably comes from this Madeira island. This is the Madeira island, and it is still very popular wine place. Now, you'll be surprised that sandesh, which is a Bengali sweet, has a Portuguese influence. The idea of breaking milk was not common in India. So the Portuguese taught them how to make this cottage cheese, chana, which is used in sandesh. So the kind of influence Portuguese have had, the Vasco da Gama was a culinary imperialist. An Indian food will not be what it is without the intervention of the Portuguese. This is sandesh. Now the dates, of course, came from, they still come from Arabia. But here there is a very interesting thing. Dates are called tamar in Arabic. And if you see tamarind, tamarind is called tamar-e-hind, the dates from India. That's how the word tamarind came into English language. This is breadfruit, again comes from Brazil. Now the bread, pau, which is very popular. Goa is a gateway of bread for the country. The bread is not Indian. We had chapatis and rotis. The bread is the introduction by the Portuguese. And Goa is the only place where the baker comes to your home every day in the morning and in the afternoon with fresh bread. So this is the Goan baker. This is one of the sculptures I did of Goan bread using cycle tires, because the baker comes on a bicycle with a basket at the back distributing bread. This is choriça, the sausages which are very famous in Goa, again introduced by the Portuguese. The mangoes are very much Indian. All the Brazilian mangoes, Brazil is known for mangoes, the mangoes went from here. But what is interesting is the Jesuit priests were excellent at grafting. So the Jesuit priests created a lot of varieties of mangoes. That's why all the Goan mangoes, most of them have a Portuguese name. And the king of all mangoes in India, Alfonso, was created by Jesuit priest Mr. Alfonso. And that's why it's Alfonso, Musarat, Bishop, Mancurad, Xavier. All these words are basically Portuguese words. The mangoes are very much Indian. Now here in, this is Vishakam Tirumal Ramavarma of Travancore. Now he introduced tapioca here. Now tapioca is again from Brazil. He thought that tapioca could be a good substitute for wheat and rice because it has a lot of starch. And so this was introduced by this Maharaja here in Travancore. You know, the fasting food of all Hindus is sabudana khichdi. Now imagine if my great-great-grandson goes to the priest, unlikely, but if he goes to the priest and asks, what should I eat for fasting? I won't be surprised if the priest says, please eat chocolate flavor Kellogg's. This sounds like a joke, but what we eat today for fasting is sabudana khichdi, and sabudana is Videshi. It comes from Brazil. So even for the fasting food of Hindus is from Brazil. This is tapioca. Now, Babur comes in 1526, and when he finds the food in India uneatable. In Baburnama, he writes about how there is nothing here worth eating. And he's missing his melons, the melons from Samarkhand. And whenever any friends come from Samarkand, they bring melons for him. And he starts gifting these melons to the local kings here in India. And the kings think, what is wrong with him? Why is he giving us melon? But for him, the melon is the most precious thing. And he starts gifting melons to people. Now, these are the melons from Samarkand, which Babur loved. Now, Akbar, on the other hand, when he goes for his military expeditions to Samarkand, he starts missing Indian food. He says there is nothing worth eating in Samarkand because he's already hooked onto the Indian spices. The pulao from Samarkand comes to India, gets married with the spices, and biryani is born. Biryani is born in Delhi. The pulao is the same pulao which is from Samarkand, which Babur brings here, also went to Europe. It goes to Italy and becomes risotto, and it goes to Spain and becomes paella rice. So it's all this is actually pulao. And Akbar likes ananas very much. He likes pineapple, and the Portuguese sort of gift pineapple to him, and he employs a Portuguese priest to look after his garden so that for his breakfast, he always likes a pineapple. But he also is not just happy with pineapple for breakfast. He also has a Portuguese wife, and her name is Maria Mascarenhas. And that's perhaps the reason why such a powerful emperor does not just take over Goa, because he has a wife who is Portuguese. This is the pulao. The biryani is a marriage between the pulao and the spices of India. The kebabs, and here is the Galauti kebab has a very interesting story. Nawab Asaf ul Dawla of Lucknow, he lived for quite till old age. He had become very fat and lost all his teeth, but he still loved mutton. So what is to be done? So his cook created some kebab which just melts in the mouth. So basically, the discovery of this kebab is basically it has a dental history. Badam is from Central Asia. Halwa is Iranian. Uh, the jalebis are again Iranian. Faluda is Iranian. Samosa is basically Arab idea, but potato inside is from Brazil. So this is again very foreign. Um, Naan comes from Central Asia. Even today, the hardcore RSS people, when they give their tadka for their vegetables with hing, asafoida still comes from Afghanistan. So it is a very Islamic tadka, very, very Islamic tadka. We import 1,200 tons of asafoida and $100 million is spent on asafoida. The British influences, of course, are tea, salad, soups, cakes, cucumber sandwich, omelette, the dining table, porcelain instead of sitting down and eating on banana leaf, fork, knife, table manners. So all these are British influences. You'll be surprised that there was a time when ice was imported into India, all the way from America, from Boston. This was in 1833, Frederick Tudor bought 180 tons of ice to Calcutta. It took 4 months for the ship to come from Boston to Calcutta. And just 2/3 of the ice remained, 180 tons. There were big storages set up in Calcutta, in Chennai, in Madras, and in Bombay. And it was a profitable business. Because it was so profitable, the US government set up an embassy in Bombay. But in 1874, ice factory was set up in Bombay. When the ice factory was set up, there was no need of importing ice from all the way from Boston. But in the meanwhile, Thoreau, the poet, the American poet, he wrote a beautiful poem. He says, now the water of my beloved Walden is going to join the holy water of Ganges. So even ice was imported here. And this is a building in Chennai. This was a storehouse. This is where ice was stored. Today, it is looking a little different. It is no more storing ice, but it has become Swami Vivekananda Kendra. This is a building which stored ice once upon a time. Chai. Tea, of course, was introduced here by the British. It came from China. We were not drinking tea until the beginning of 20th century. The tea was brought here basically for British consumption. But today, we can't do without tea. Tea basically went to England because Catherine Braganza, a Portuguese princess, married Prince Charles of England. And the dowry which was given was the island of Bombay, 100,000 pounds, island of Tangiers in Morocco, and a chest of tea. All over the world, we call it chai. In China, it is cha. Here we call it chai. Only in England it is tea, and white tea. One of the reasons is this. There's a box which was written Transportus Aromaticas. This was a gift, this was a dowry given to the Prince Charles by the Portuguese princess. And there's one theory, it is because of this, the short form of this became tea. Otherwise, we don't know why the British should suddenly call it tea. The first chaiwala was not our beloved Prime Minister. This is the first chaiwala, Mr. Lipton. There was a campaign actually of propagating, making tea popular, and the British had a lot of excess tea. And so what do they do with this excess tea? And they thought that they are sitting on a huge market, and they started making campaigns for distributing tea, selling tea in India. It started first with the army, the British army, then the railway stations. And this Maniram Dewan was the first Indian tea planter. And he was hung publicly in 1857 because he took part in the 1857 revolution. He was the first Indian tea planter. There's a tea planting. There are a Hindu tea stall and a Muslim tea stall. when the tea was made popular here, there were separate tea stalls in the railway stations for Hindus and Muslims. Now I will briefly talk about beef. I will talk about beef because people get killed because they keep beef. And another reason is it is sort of taken for granted that beef, the Muslims eat beef, the Christians eat beef, and that is why sort of beef is not, we were not eating beef here. That is what is told to us. And I'm not giving my wisdom. These three people are some of the greatest scholars of Sanskrit, and these are archaeologists, the last one. Pandurang Vaman Kane, he wrote the history of Dharma Shastra. He is a Bharat Ratna awardee. We had Lakshman Shastri Joshi, another great Sanskrit scholar. And these people were not communists. They were not anti-Hindus. All of them tell us absolutely clearly that all the Indian scriptures, Rig Vedas, mention consumption of beef. There was the Yagyas, Ashwamedha, where the cows were killed, and there was the Go-Medha Yajna, and beef was eaten in India during the Vedic period. Later on, basically because of Buddhism and Jainism, this practice was stopped, and I think the vegetarianism basically was an influence of Buddhism and Jainism. Buddhists, of course, did eat non-vegetarian. I have myself enjoyed a nice chicken meal with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But the Jainism was absolutely against any killing, any meat eating. Atithi Nira was a name given to a cow, a young cow fit for a guest. That was the name which exists in Rig Veda. We have Go Ghana. A guest was called Go Ghana because when a guest came, the calf will be killed. So he is the killer of the calf. So the guest is described as Go Ghana in Rig Vedas. This is me enjoying chicken with His Holiness. Now here, this gentleman, Krishna Kumar Sinji of Bhavnagar, was the first governor of Madras state. He was the first one when Vallabhbhai Patel appealed to the local kings to join the Indian Union. He was the first one to join, and he became the governor of Madras. Now, there is a statue of Krishna Kumar Sinji in Rio de Janeiro outside the parliament in Brazil. Now, this statue was put there because, when the Portuguese took over Brazil, they took the European cows first, and the European cows would die. That's because the climate was completely different. So they decided to take cows from India, and those survived. And Krishna Kumar Sinji went to Brazil, and he gifted a bull called Krishna to Celso Garcia, who was a cattle baron. And so he is responsible for development of industry, the beef, the cattle industry in Brazil. He had a huge contribution, and to recognize that contribution, the Brazilian government made a statue of him in Rio de Janeiro. Now, what are the cows? This is Gir bull from Gujarat, but then we have Ongal, we have the Katrej cattle from Gujarat. So, all 95% of cattle in South America are of Indian origin, and they have a very interesting name. They are called Brahmin cows or Aryan cows. And interestingly, non-resident Indian cows are allowed to be slaughtered. Because Brazil is the largest producer of beef in the world. I'm not exactly propagating beef eating. I would definitely say that vegetarianism is good, and I would argue for vegetarianism. But we should not be under the wrong concept that the Muslims introduced beef eating here. Beef eating existed here. Mahatma Gandhi, in 1914, Mahatma Gandhi was returning to India via England. And he was already a very well-known man in South Africa. And everybody was aware of Mahatma Gandhi's on this ship. And everybody also knew about his eating fads. So now Kasturba requested the captain that we would like to cook separately for Gandhiji. Would you allow us to cook separately, not the common? So the captain said, no problem. We have an empty cabin. We will put a stove there, and you can cook for your husband there. Gandhiji came to know about it. He said, no, I don't want a separate cabin. I would like just a small corner of the common kitchen of the ship, and I would cook there. Both of us will cook something there. But the captain said, well, there is beef, pork, sausages, everything there. He said, doesn't matter, let it be there. So that was the stance of Mahatma Gandhi as far as the, uh, I mean, tolerance of other people's food. Because not tolerating other people's food also will amount to himsa. And ahimsa basically also meant that you tolerate what the others say, don't interfere with their food. And that's what exactly precisely happening today. Uh, I was invited to Portugal to create a work in a garden called Tapada das Necessidades. Tapada das Necessidades means the garden of necessities. This is in Lisbon, next to the port. And every sailor who sailed off from Lisbon had to go and pray in a chapel in this garden. And that's why it was called the Garden of Necessities. So they invited me to do an installation in this garden. I decided to take a poetic revenge on the Portuguese. Since they have changed all that we eat, I thought, let me take a poetic revenge on the Portuguese. So I took rice from Goa and planted it in this garden in the form of the sea root of Vasco da Gama. So when the rice grew, it did not just grow rice, it sprouted history. So I think, let me end by telling you that if we have to think of any Ghar Wapasi program, we have to first think about food Wapasi program. We have to give up all this which we are eating today, which has been brought by the Portuguese and from the Muslims. This is impossible, and the strongest Bhakt will not agree. And that is why this is an impossibility. The idea of pure culture is a foolish idea. There is nothing called pure culture anywhere in the world. The idea of pure culture is like having a non-peeing area in a swimming pool. So friends, thank you very much for giving me a patient hearing. I think there was a lovely talk by Devdutt Patnaik, and what he spoke, I think if those who are in power listen to the kind of wisdom he spoke, things would be different. Now, open to questions. Most welcome. Yeah. Not according to me. The Vedic food we could consider. Yeah. So the Harappan food could be the oldest food that we ate. We had basically rice, wheat, barley. We had uh, we had all the citrus fruits. We had mangoes. We had all the pulses, all dals. So this is what we ate. And even some of these things have come from outside, even at that time, because the Indus Valley civilization was in constant contact with the Mesopotamian and the Egyptian civilization. So there was already a connection. So a lot of things have come even from there. So there is nothing called pure food anywhere. And I have not even gone to Kentucky Fried Chicken and Lay's and Kurkure. Anybody? Yeah, please. Yeah.
She wasn't a Portuguese woman. It was a brilliant presentation. I just loved it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out one aspect which I think requires correction, which
Okay.
is about Akbar's Portuguese wife.
Yeah.
It's since been disproven that there was no such person.
Okay.
And Jahangir's mother was given the title of Mariam uz Zamani.
Yeah.
And interestingly, she was a Hindu who had married a Muslim. So once again, it only goes to add to your
Okay.
presentation. That was
Yeah,
the only
well,
thing.
there
Thank
are
you.
many other theories. Some people feel that Jodabai was Portuguese. So the many theories I have read. But well, I mean, that's not very material as far as my presentation today is concerned. Yeah.
Check. So my question was about your comments on the South Indian cuisine of idli, dosa, and stuff. Were they actually indigenous or did they come from outside?
No, I mean, the Shola kings ruled Southeast Asia, so obviously there must have been some things which came from there. So the fermentation was not common here. fermentation, because in India, like even in Goa, when the bread came, the Portuguese brought bread, only the Christians ate it. The Hindus refused to eat it because the fermentation technology was used, and they thought it was impure. And so it's only now that Hindus and Christians and everybody enjoys bread in Goa. A piece of bread thrown into a Hindu well was enough for baptizing the whole family. So bread was a conversion agent in Goa. Yeah. Yeah. No, as far as my studies go, rice is very much present in Harappan civilization. We have even found charred wheat in in excavations, including these laddus. Millets were also there, but millets, many people feel have African origin. Yeah. But then there was trade. During 2500 BC, there was a Lothal in Gujarat, and there were ships from Arabia, from African coast coming to Lothal. So globalization has already started, right from Harappan civilization.
Subodh, the lovely presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever wondered where filter coffee came from? Like the Chennai filter coffee?
No, what happened? No, I didn't. Well, coffee originates in Turkey. That's coffee all over the world originates in Turkey. That's what my studies tell me. Well, I mean, I love filter coffee here. I've had all kind of coffees all over the world, but I always order a filter coffee. So I'm in love with the South Indian filter coffee.
Hello, sir. Here.
Yeah.
So my question is also regarding to millets. Now we can see that government of India is promoting the consumption of millets.
Yes.
Just like how in the 80s and 90s there was this wheat production. So is it just because the production is happening more, or there is some other reason behind? At every stage, some or the other grain is being promoted or asked us to be consumed more.
So it is like this. As far as this government is concerned, they want to promote everything which they feel is original Indian. That's what they want to promote. So they feel, but there is also, I think, there's a lot of cultural illiteracy. But of course, I'm very much for millets, promotion of millets. I have nothing against promotion of millets. But the reason why the government is promoting so many things, Rama himself has become a prisoner in the politics, in the Ashoka one of politics. Yeah. The original food, as I told you earlier, is from the Indus Valley civilization. Is the oldest food we can talk about. And in 2020, actually, there's a chef from Calcutta who has studied Harappan food, Indus Valley food, and they decided to serve Harappan food, Indus Valley food, in the National Museum in Delhi. And everything was organized that the food was supposed to be served. Suddenly, some RSS guys said, "Oh, how can we have non-vegetarian food when the sculptures of Devatas is there in the National Museum?" So that plan was abandoned, and ultimately the food was served in a local restaurant near in Delhi. Yeah.
What is God's food and
Huh?
what are superfoods?
What?
What is superfoods and what's God's food?
No, there is, I think, God's food, all the yagyas, when the yagyas were made and the sacrifices were made for the god, because Indra allowed, for example, calves, and some god allowed something, that essentially means that a priest allowed it. That's because there was even a rule that, okay, so what part of the animal will go to whom? A certain right calf would go to the chief priest and others. So basically, God's food and human food is the same. Thank you very much.